Hi, everyone. Okay, welcome to our fascia workshop. So I'm hoping to get through this pretty quickly, and then if you guys have questions, if you can just jot them down and we'll go kind of over them all at the end, just in case I cover something that is going to be a question, just so that if people have to get out of here and do other things with their lives, they can do that. So I wanted to start this fascia workshop because I think it's a really important idea of how people get injured. It's understanding why you get injured and why you get re-injured. So that's why I wanted to do this workshop. So I'm going to try and make it where we kind of rush through the fascia stuff so you have a good understanding of what's most applicable for you as we get into kind of the injury and the movement and the recovery piece. And that's Rebecca. And that's not a real fascia line. That's AI's version of a fascia line. So, all right. See, you all needed one. Okay, which I need one too. So, this is why you need one. Ooh, mine's a little squishy. All right. So basically, this is fascia. This is your skin. Okay, so the peel is basically your skin. We have that top layer. Break into it. And if you don't eat it, I promise I'll eat it. I love them. All right, so right when you break into it, you'll see there's a first layer here. That's going to be what we call superficial fascia. So when we talk about fascia, a lot of people just think about what they're kind of foam rolling, or they think about thoracolumbar fascia. That's a big famous one. That's that big white thing here when you look at the anatomy guy. Tensor fascia latae, a lot of you know what that is. Your IT band is a giant strip of fascia. But really, fascia resides in your entire body. So it's a cellular mechanotransduction thing in your body. So there's different layers. It's not important to know the layers, but I think it's nice to know the layers. So superficial fascia is this first piece. So this white on the inside of your skin is basically your superficial fascia. It pretty much resides in your fat layer, and it changes based on what your body needs to do in that particular place. So if you take your forearm and you slap your hand on your forearm and you go like this, you are not moving your muscle, you're moving your skin over your muscle. The reason you can do that is because there is a fascial layer between your skin and your muscle that allows this to happen. Because you can imagine how painful it would be if your skin was suction cupped onto your muscle and you tried to move and there was no give. Now go to your palm. Press into your palm and try to find that same shear. It's not there, right? So the fascia will differentiate based on what is needed at the spot. You'll also find this kind of tougher fascia, non-glidey, non-movey under your feet, and that keeps us from falling over, right? Because you can only imagine if we had this on our feet, that would be tricky to walk with. So it's a little bit, the fascia reacts to your movement. Your IT band is not on you as you come out of the womb. It's not on you until you start walking. So your IT band is a development of you standing upright. It's not something that just came out as part of your anatomy, okay? So if we peel this open a little bit more and we get to the deep fascia, and I'll go between fascia and fascia because I have different teachers. So the thing that separates each wedge is going to be more of your deep fascia. So these are things like septums. So they're fascial layers that run between muscles. And this is kind of how we get our anatomy descriptions. So muscles aren't separate. So when you're kind of saying like, well, what muscle am I working? It's kind of a lie when I tell you it's like, oh, it's your biceps. That's a lie. It is your bicep. It's just not fully clear. So yes, it's your bicep, but your bicep can't function by itself. It has to function with the whole entire rest of that line. And so this is what they're kind of using to say like, oh, this is a bicep, is there's a thicker fascial layer there. The reason that there's a thicker fascial layer between muscles is because those two muscles need to either be able to glide or shear against each other. So they have to be able to produce different torques of force. Does that make sense? So if they didn't need to glide and move separate of each other, then there probably wouldn't be a large fascia thing in there. Okay? Now, some of you are getting ahead. All right. Inside, that's your muscle fiber. You'll never be able to eat a tangerine again. So your muscles are made up of fibers, and then those fibers have tinier fibers, and then those fibers, it's like the mirror where it's just like back and forth, back and forth. It's just tinier and tinier and tinier and tinier muscle fibers until you're at a cellular level. Every single one of those are also wrapped in fascia. So every single muscle fiber also can glide along itself so that your muscle can move in different ways and not just in one chunk. And you could isolate, not even though I said you couldn't, but you could target more the bottom of your bicep versus the top of your bicep based on kind of shear, glide, how you turn your forearm, things like that. So the fascia is kind of making it so that those muscles can shear and glide, or those muscle fibers can shear and glide so that we have a wider variety of movement. So the more you move, the more you're gonna have this shear and glide and this coordination within your muscles. Okay? Any questions on that? Yeah?
Is that still called a deep fascia, or is that
They don't have a name for that one yet, because no one can really dissect it. So you can't really name it yet. So that's kind of the basis of what fascia is. All right. What is fascia like? Okay, so we all have like, I would assume a lot of us have had like the sweater discussion, like, oh, your fascia, like you get injured here and it's scar tissue and it pulls like this. And I don't know, that's like kind of the first part of fascia. But it's important to understand that it's web-like. So there's a bunch of different ways that it can interlock. Your superficial fascia that lies right on top is very web-like because it kind of, like I can make this go in a circle if I want. So if you imagine what kind of substance is needed in order for me to be able to do that, that's pretty web-like. Versus if you go to touch the fascia in your back here, that's that thoracolumbar fascia that I was saying is kind of the big white thing. That actually will have like collagen fibers that go like this way, and they're direct lines because we walk contralaterally. And so those fascial collagen lines here will match up with that. I'm gonna grab my notes because I will go off topic. So that's the one thing to think about is how it's more web-like. So we've got, this is kind of what Gil Hedley calls the fuzz, which is the fascia between the fascia. So get real confusing. And then this is actually kind of what you would see in a live dissection. That's a thicker fascia, so that's gonna be deep fascia that someone can actually pull off of the muscle and see. The other thing is that it's hydrated. And this is something that I try and tell people all the time. With hydration, you will not get hydrated without movement. The way water gets absorbed into your body is the fascia, let's say, calls it. As fascia moves, it works as a sponge. So it squeezes out water and then it calls water to it. And that's how you're hydrating your body. So it's super slippery, super hydrated substance, but it's also part of what helps hydrate our muscles, helps bring fluid to that area. Okay? Shears and glides, we already went that, right? Shears and glides. Rigid and pliable, that's gonna be like our palm and the base of our foot. Responsive and reflex, this is the important piece of what we're gonna get into when it comes to recovering from injury. Your fascial system is a nervous system superhighway. So your nervous system is working with the entire body to say, tense this up, don't tense this up. And we'll talk about that more. So eccentric strength, kind of the same thing. So it's what allows it so that as our muscles get longer, we can actually still have control versus a concentric where we're just shortening. That seems very obvious. We're shortening a lever, but what makes it so that we can do that and fights against us? That's fascia. Force production across joints. So we'll get into this too when we talk about movement. And then tensegrity. I'm so excited about my pelvis. Ta-da! Okay, so I know it's so cute, right? All right, so and I love that they made them like Easter egg colors. I didn't get to choose. So this is kind of like this is not anatomically correct. Jay asked me, he's like, "Is that anatomically correct?" And I said, "It's tensegrity correct." So what the idea is that these are your bones floating within the fascia. So your bones act like the rigidity and the struts needed, but they're not being pulled necessarily by the muscles to move. They're being pulled by the fascia. Your fascia is also lining itself on your bones, so it will come like at this thoracolumbar fascia. It actually comes in and wraps around into the spine because that's one of your like embryonic places, so it's all kind of one thing that never got detached. But it will latch onto the bones to create structure. What this means is that your bones aren't holding you up, your muscles aren't holding you up, your fascia is holding you up. Fun, right? Okay, so let me just make sure I'm not gonna. Oh, there it is. Okay. So tensegrity, this is kind of the rainbow arch. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this before. Art model, architectural. Okay. So that's basically what we're talking about is fascia forms a continuous network surrounding all the muscles, and as we talked about, not just the muscles, not just the bones, but everything else in between, including your organs, everything. So, and that is what helps distribute force across the body as opposed to localizing it into one spot. So if I'm to trip and fall and I land like this, it's not just where I take the impact. That whole force is absorbed up into my whole body, up to my neck, right? And the reason that is because the fascia system is doing this. It's creating that tension throughout the whole body. It's using the muscles, it's using the bones as its activators, or the muscles are its tensioners, and the bones are its little struts. But the fascia is actually what's holding us up. Okay, so the other thing I want to talk about is the integrity of the tensegrity. And I came up with that. I know. Okay, so that's basically your injury, is how good is the integrity of your tensegrity, right? So if I hang on a hip here, I'm buckling my tensegrity line right here because I'm not tensioning my tensegrity line. It doesn't mean I'm going to get injured in my hip. For most people, it means they're going to get injured in their knee, okay? So we want to kind of think about this whole full line of tension and the body working more as a system as opposed to an isolated piece, okay? The fascial system allows us to have things like posture, mobility, but then it's also really comes, I know everybody's sitting up straight, I like it. It also comes into play with healing as well, right? So feedback to the brain, letting the brain knows what is going on, what's injured, blah, 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 okay? So I love Leonardo da Vinci. But again, he's not wrong, he's just not precise. Okay, the joints between bones obey the tendon, and the tendon obeys the muscle, and the muscle the nerve. I could have had this tattooed on me 20 years ago. I love this so much, but it's not fully correct. So that's kind of what we've been thinking, right? Is I have this muscle, I have this bone as the lever, I fire up the muscle, it pulls the lever. It's not true. So tension is the great integrity. See, I didn't really make it up. Okay, Buckminster Fuller is the one who did it architecturally. And this is what we're trying to think about, is tension is what our muscles are being used for, not as lever pullers, okay? All right. Biotensegrity is what they've kind of called what tensegrity is within the human. So instead of us just being that rainbow bridge that we saw, we have a lot more going on, right? We have an entire nervous system that is continually and constantly kind of pulling, tugging, adjusting, doing whatever it is we need so our eyes can move, so our head can move, so that you guys can start at the top and go to the bottom. It's a lot more adaptive and dynamic than just that rainbow bridge we saw. So biotensegrity is the term that we're using now. So the reason why we're kind of on muscles and levers is because when you're in a cadaver lab, you're in a dissection lab, and you have an embalmed body, the fascia is dehydrated and not visible. It would only be visible. You can do a little bit, like that first slide we saw, that was the bottom one, that was an embalmed body. You could see the thick ones, like thoracolumbar fascia, but you couldn't see fascia floating around muscles and floating within your fat cells and all of that stuff. That wasn't available. So what happened was in the 90s, they kind of started to switch into unembalmed bodies for dissection. And then they were kind of like, well, what the hell is that? So they started to look into books and they couldn't really figure out what it was. And that's kind of when fascia started to take a different turn as far as well, we're misunderstanding what's going on because we missed this entire piece of the body. And this is again where it's the same thing as your pec muscle is only a pec muscle because somebody cut it out of the rest of the stuff. Does that make sense? Your bicep's only a bicep because someone cut it out. Your quad is only 4 muscles because somebody cut them apart. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's the muscle, because if you actually watch the lines, the same line that makes up the IT band makes up your medial meniscus, your medial lateral ligament, collateral ligament, and your ACL. It's one spiral that comes around and does a little infinity sign. And you could cut it out of someone just like that and call it something else. But we've always cut them apart and called them separate things. Okay? So this hasn't been around long enough for me to grab an image from the internet. So I made my own image. You're welcome. So this is basically your gait phase. So contact phase, you hit your heel, mid-stance phase, you're loading. Propulsive phase, or propulsion phase is what they used to call it, because you were pressing off. And what we find is that's not actually true. So the transmission of forces is more because of tensioning of the muscles. So by the time you get to a toe off, you're not pushing yourself off, it's recoiling. So you've stretched this fascia across the front so much that the foot flicks off and swings forward. So we've gone from thinking of gait as kind of a primarily concentric, I'm extending my hip for my glute max, like this, like climbing up Sanitas, when that's not actually true. It's more of a reactive, kind of eccentric, flow. And it's because our bodies are designed to be as efficient as possible. Concentric exercises, does everybody know concentric, like shortening, takes a ton of calories. Eccentric does not. You're just kind of slowing down the muscle getting longer. So your gait becomes less labored and more efficient in that eccentric way. So let's see. I think I want to have you guys. All right. So this, again, couldn't find it on the internet, so I took a picture. This is basically your gait cycle. So James Earls wrote a book, Born to Walk, and they did EMG, so touching so that they could see when muscles are firing at their most. So this is the part of gait. So this is where you're reaching out just about to heel strike. This is your glute max. You can't read it, but just trust me. So your glute isn't working when you're pushing forward. Your glute is turning on to decelerate hip flexion as you come through and to anticipate landing. Okay? That information can't be organized unless you have some sort of full body system, and that full body system is your fascia. Okay, and I was gonna have us try this, but there's so many of us and I don't wanna move chairs, so we'll try it after. All right, so this is 95% of your glute max being active. So like all of it, right before heel strike. Okay, and then we have rectus femoris, which is the front. And I've decided I want to go down this rabbit hole. So you have 4 muscles. That's why your quadricep is a quadricep. Okay, rectus femoris is one of them, and it is on a different fascial plane than the other 3. And it's because it comes up and it attaches into the hip, whereas the other 3 do this, right? We all know like quads do knee extension. You sit on that machine, but they don't really do biceps femoris because that's more into hip extension. So it decelerates or breaks hip extension in your gait. It stretches out and then it springs forward as you come forward in your walk. I know, I'm glad you're all thinking it's cool. I think it's cool. So your hamstrings have 3, biceps femoris, semitendinosus, and semimembranosus. And they're firing at most after you cross mid-stance and come through. So again, they're acting as something that is a decelerator and not a contractor of the movement. So you're not actually pulling this through and pushing yourself off is the main thing I want you to get from this. All right, this is where it gets relevant for people. So fascia and injury. So injury is a break or disturbance in the integrity of the biotensegrity chain. And we'll go over kind of some common ones that people have identified just so that you have a little bit of a roadmap. But basically, we're seeing a buckle in the chain. And like I said with the hip, the buckle could be at the hip, or maybe it's at your low back, but it's actually showing up, the injury is showing up in your knee, or maybe it's showing up as plantar fasciitis, or maybe it's showing up as a shoulder injury. So there's a break or disturbance in the integrity of the biotensegrity chain equals a loss of distribution of load of force, right? So imagine if you're like, okay, I'm gonna pick up my toddler and they're gonna stand like, they're gonna be like this, and you pick them up, versus if they were like this, right? So the load is no longer transferred along a huge line if there's a buckle. Now it's only transferred into a smaller area, and usually, because the joints are where we have most of the movement, the joint is what's gonna take most of the impact of that movement. So it's not necessarily that your hip's bad or your shoulder's bad or even that your back's bad. It's that the integrity line has been, or the tensegrity line has lost its tension. So now it's not a tension rod, and now wherever you're breaking, that's where it's shoving you, right? So the most common thing in posture that we'll see, right, is that we have that break with anterior hip, rib flare, hip shift forward of the ankles, right? There's a buckle here, but this isn't probably what's gonna show up first. So if I'm in my 30s, I'm probably gonna have something like an Achilles pain, or maybe a knee injury, maybe a high hamstring, right? But as I get older, this compression is definitely gonna start to catch up to me. So then as I get older, this is where it's gonna start to show up. But it's all the same thing. It's been the same thing for 30, 40 years. So it's this, we need this line of tension so that we can actually hold ourselves up, and that's what keeps us from getting injured and making ourselves resilient. So, and it's kind of like, that's what I'm saying, like whatever is the weakest link. So it can be a strain of a muscle. It can be just a little, like you can start with just feeling a little bit of pain, right? That's a pretty good signal that probably something's starting to go. It can be muscle strain, but then you can have things like Achilles tendon ruptures, right? You can, to the max, you can really break that tensegrity chain. So, I don't want to go to that one yet. So I wanted to use this as a little bit of an example as the ACL, because it's really studied a lot. I don't know if you guys know this, but within 2 years, 85% of people who tear their ACL either re-tear the same ACL or tear the other side. So our ACL protocol for rehabbing is not working, as far as I'm concerned. I wouldn't even say it's not good, it's not working. So a lot of people, because this rate is so high, a lot of people have used this as what they're studying as far as injury. So an ACL tears in 70 milliseconds. So there's no way that you can think to myself, oh, I should turn on my hamstring and get my calf to fire and blah, 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 turn on my core, blah, 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 right? So this is where I was saying that the fascia is a nervous system highway. It's this reaction to spread that force out that keeps us strong. And it's a lack of our body to be able to do that, which is where we see the ACL tear in the first place. The reason it tears again is because once you've torn something, who has scar tissue here? Who has felt it? Does it feel hydrated? Does it shear? Does it glide? Yeah, okay. So it's not exactly a good replacement right out of the gate. So general strength is always key. Like if you don't have a general foundation of strength, how would you be able to hold yourself up tall, right? So in general, strength is good. But if we're looking at return to sport, they're looking at now that with our current rehab protocols, an ACL injury would take 5 years. And even at 5 years, when they use a force plate to do a one-legged jump, so they have them jump, come to a squat and jump back up, the reaction, so therefore the deceleration to reproduction of force, is still slower than the other one, even 10, 15 years down the line, but it's at an acceptable level that it could actually catch you. But we're putting out athletes a year after. It doesn't mean that we can't do better than 5 years. It's just nobody's actually training the fascia. They're training your hamstring and your quad muscle and your calf muscle. And they're not really training this reactive explosive power. And so that's something that needs to change. So if we're looking at ACL, we're looking at not only what's the force production across the knee, but we're looking at that whole line. So we're looking at how fast does my arch react, right? How fast does my calf react? How fast can my hip engage so that I don't crumble here? Now that's going straight up into the back. How fast can that react? Can that react? Can that react? All the way up to my shoulder. So it's something that has to be trained, and we don't have training protocols. No one has designed them yet to actually make this happen. But my guess is it's right around the corner just based on these numbers. So let's go into, we spread out of absorption. Yeah, great. Yay, my guy. I know, it's okay. Okay. So that's the doomsday speech, and you're all feeling pretty sad. So we'll make it a little bit better. Okay, so injury prevention. Number one thing that you can do for injury prevention is make yourself stronger, make yourself more resilient. Load yourself in different varieties of ways, and load yourself heavy enough that you can take an impact, right? We don't hurt ourselves. Well, I hurt myself sleeping sometimes, but like for the most part, our big injuries come from some sort of impact, whether we trip and we fall, whether it's a car accident, it doesn't matter. It's usually some sort of impact. So we want to have overall strength. Our first thing for overall strength, isometrics, right? Just being able to make sure that we can tension the muscle, because remember, our muscle is not our mover, but it's our tensioning rod. If we can't tension all of our rods because all of our muscles are not able to fire correctly, then we can't tension our entire fascial chain. So isometrics are the first. Concentric, so now we're making our tensioners, our muscles, bigger. So now it takes me less tension basically or less muscle fire to create the tension in the muscle fiber because I just made the muscle bigger. Eccentric control, and that's going to be your braking and your deceleration and your force absorption. So your body's ability to brake with control, and then we would go back to concentric for the explosion piece. Mobility, you can't move or you don't move, right? So if your mobility is getting smaller, you have a greater range of vulnerability. So the more that you can move, and mobility isn't just range of motion, it's how much range of motion can you control, right? So if I can put my head up over, or my leg up over my head, that's great. But if I can only do it when someone's holding it and then they let go of it, it drops to here, this is my mobility, not this. This is my flexibility, this is my mobility. So I have what we call, this is an active range, this is a passive range. When you have a gap that big between active and passive, you don't have control of that entire range. That actually makes you more vulnerable. So as you gain range, you also have to gain control. And then coordination. So trying to link up across joints, right? So we're not just training one muscle, we're trying to link up across the joints. So muscles as tensioners, that's what we want to kind of think about, not as movers, right? There was that lovely X I made, not a mover. Force absorption, nervous system retraining. When you're doing explosive movements and you're retraining those eccentric loads and that braking, you're doing nervous system retraining. Eccentric load control, that's braking. Force production, coordination. These are all the things that we need to train our muscles to do. Not necessarily like, oh, we just need our muscles to be strong. We need to train our muscles to do all of these things, okay? Inefficiency of movement equals less force production, which means of course, all of us are like, oh, that's all I can do, so I'm never gonna go outside that box. Nope. So that equals compensation patterns, which circles us back to re-injury. So if we don't take care of the efficiency of movement first, that's our guaranteed end, right? So we have to this is what we need for efficiency of movement. When we have this, then we can start to go. And I'm not saying don't do your activities, there's dosages, right? There's a difference between hiking Sanitas and then going up and hiking a 14er that's gonna take you 12 hours. Those are different dosages of activity. Maybe you have enough to do something like a Sanitas and not something like a 14er. Or you have enough to go on a 1 mile walk. You don't have enough to go on Sanitas. So, all right. If you didn't hear it already. Okay, so we're gonna go into fascial maps. So this is like this is a good, there's a little star on his butt. Great. So that's our look up star. That's our biotensegrity star, really. Because if you look down, guess what? You just broke your biotensegrity line. So we put all these stars, they're all over the gym. So we can be like, look up at the star. All right, so fascial maps. The two basic ones are your functional slings. Okay, anterior sling, posterior sling. These have been around, I don't know, probably at least since the early 2000s, if not a little bit before. It is user-friendly, super accessible. You can start doing things with this tomorrow. Okay, so instead of training, I don't want to train just my lat. I want to train this lat, how it tensions my thoracolumbar fascia, and how my glute can stabilize it. So if I'm doing something like an overhead press, my left butt is stabilizing my right arm. But what will happen is people will be like, oh, my right arm's so weak. And I'll look and the left glute's not even firing. And I'm like, well, it's not so weak. You're just making your right shoulder do everything. Versus on the other side, you were having your glute max start the action, which really your foot did, right? In order for that glute max to fire. And it came up all the way into that left shoulder. So of course that left side feels a lot easier. Does that make sense? So, and then the front line is just the other side. External obliques into internal obliques into adductors. If you've ever done a Copenhagen plank on the bench, this is why you're doing it. This is why people do them. So it's because it attaches this entire anterior sling. All right, let's see if I can make this loud and you guys can actually. No, it's in my headphones. So this is the spiral line. So if you talk to Tom Myers, this is his version of a muscle. This is what you should train. Yeah. So you start from your neck, and then of course you come into the rhomboids, and then you swing down into the raised anterior. You can watch it all over. If you can hear him, it's great because he goes, we've dissected this many times in the middle of it. So there's your anterior sling that I just showed you, right? So he still has anterior sling. Coming down to the anterior becomes part of your arch. You do not have to memorize this. All the way into the back of the hamstring. Okay. So, I want to play again. Great. That's the example of the spiral line in anatomy trains. The spiral line is associated with gait. So it's going to be one of your more complex lines because gait is one of the more complex movements that we do as humans, especially as far as fascia is concerned, because like I said, we're trying to be efficient. And so if something like walking, like our bodies are designed to go 9 miles a day. If we're designed to go 9 miles a day, then we better be pretty efficient at walking. Our bodies are not designed to do 9 miles a day, but our ancestors' bodies were. So the spiral line is one of the most complex lines, but I just wanted to highlight the point of if he's training somebody for something like running or gait or hiking, that line he's going to take into consideration. How do I tension up that whole line? Also, and Tom Myers comes from a body worker world, so he used to be a rolfer. I mean, he still is a rolfer. I don't know if you're ever not a rolfer once you're a rolfer. But, and so he'll actually follow this line in body work and see, okay, is it gliding? Is it shearing? Is it moving in the plane it's supposed to? And so that's how he'll do his body work as well. There is, I will say, a lack of movement in the anatomy trains world as far as application, but I'm going to try and figure that out for you. So that's my job right now. Okay. So, what are the main things that you can focus on to just make your life overall better starting now? Biotensegrity. Try not to sink your gum, right? This type of a thing, this type of a thing, this type of a thing, right? This type of a thing. All of those we're trying not to hang out in for long periods of time. So it's not so much that the posture is perfect, it's that stagnation will cause more injury within the fascia than a perfect posture. So not moving is the enemy, not necessarily moving incorrectly. So moving is the first thing, and then when you're moving, move strong. That's why I don't know if you've ever taken my weightlifting class, I'll be like, own that. Like, own the bar, own the weight. And that's what I'm saying is like, own it. Because like, especially if you're lifting something that's heavier than you're used to, you're kind of like, I don't really know if I can pick this up. And then that's not a tensegrity line. No, you have to be like, I own you, and like, get in there. And that's what we're talking about. So, isometric and coordination of tension, right? How much of your muscle can you fire? We spend a lot of time sitting on our biggest muscles. We're flattening them out. We're also kind of pushing and smashing the fascia together when we sit, and so that fascia can get adhered. And so we do want to make sure that we're also using that fascia in our nice gluteus maximus. Eccentric control, this is what I was talking about with the ACL. right? So now we're talking about we have to do dynamic loads. We have to do whatever we can do to tolerance, but we have to do something dynamic where our body has to react and break. That's what we're talking about with eccentric control. Elastic strength, we're talking deceleration and brake control, and then rapid force production is brake control to explosiveness. Again, so this is what our training program should look like. So the other side was what we should train our muscles to do. These are the things. We don't have push-pull day. We have isometric and coordination of tension day. across the anterior sling. Maybe we have anterior sling, posterior sling days, right? So it's like, yeah, I do. So yeah, you can kind of play with that. So additionally, so I want to go back. If you want to write down anything, this is the slide. Okay? Hold on, Deepa, I'm almost there, and then I'll take your question. So this is the slide of like what you should kind of be focusing on. This is everything else that you can also do. Non-isolated movements. The only reason you would do an isolated movement is because that area is your most vulnerable area. And I don't even do so much an isolated movement as like, I'm really trying to target, like, I'll go back to the bicep. I'm really trying to target your bicep. I'll do something where I'm like, oh, you lack hip internal rotation control. So I might target a movement pattern of internal rotation, but I'm not actually targeting like one muscle group with that. I'm just targeting the actual movement pattern. So that's the only time you would really isolate something is if you know there's a known lack. So if that's the buckle in your biotensegrity system, maybe that's where you spend a little time isolating it first, but you still have to integrate it across joint lines. If you don't integrate it across joint lines, and one line, if one side of the joint is stronger than the other in the biotensegrity line, that joint will eventually give. Because you have something going on down here, and it's not coordinating with up here. These two are not talking to each other, and it's just gonna be this kind of push-pull until that joint goes, okay? Nervous system coordination, proper glide and range of motion. So range of motion, yes, comes from the joints, right? We hear that a lot. Yes, the joints have to move, but there has to be proper glide. So again, if we go back to this sitting on our butts, if we're sitting on our hamstrings and our glutes all the time and we kind of smash that fascia together, it's not surprising that a lot of us don't have great hamstrings. Because now that fascia isn't really doing its shearing and gliding as much as it should be. Yeah, just do that. Wiggle leg, Ashley. So proper gliding movement. So this is something where you can do self-myofascial release, but the kicker with self-myofascial release, like a foam roller, is you're probably only getting to superficial fascia. You're not really getting too deep. So this is also something they're exploring, is some of our myofascial tools are only getting here. And that's it, that's the layer they're getting. There's fascia all the way to my bone. I'm not getting any of that. So I'm getting, what, an eighth of my fascia maybe? So Gil Headley, who I study with, always says keep your stories light, but your method's strong. So if your method works for you, hold on to it, but be light with the story of what you're telling yourself that you're actually doing, because we don't know, is basically what he's saying. But if it works for you, you know, if putting a tennis ball into your TFL makes your hip work, like, it makes your hip work. But we're not going to talk about how deep the fascial layer and how you've got glide back and all that stuff. It's just probably not true. So proper glide and range of motion. So proper glide, let's skip down for a second. Proper glide and range of motion comes from these three things. Okay? Proper hydration. Again, fascia calls the water. It has to be slippery, wet-like, very wet. If you're not hydrated, it becomes brittle, not pliable, easier to tear, less responsive. Okay, daily movement. Again, if you think about how the fascia is wrapping every single muscle fiber, the only way to get those muscle fibers to glide on each other is to move. You can't isolate that. And then varied movement. If we're only moving in certain planes or in certain movements, we'll get very good at those, but not at others. Like, you know, Ido Portal always said you get very good at what you don't do and very not good or very good at doing not what you do or something. I messed up. Anyway, you get the point. Varied movement, daily movement, proper hydration, and proper nutrition, right? Because proper hydration doesn't just come from drinking water, it also comes from the fruits and the vegetables that we eat as well. And then nervous system coordination. So if you're talking about something in the traditional weightlifting world, think about something as easy as tempo. Maybe you do a 3-second down and a 1 second up in your squat, like all the time. Try it 1 second down and a 3-second up, and you will like blow yourself out of the water, right? It's like nervous system coordination. You can train it. You can have different inputs. You can. This is why people freak out. We've been doing handstands in our weightlifting thing, and people like stand up and they're like, "Oh man, I gotta sit down." Nervous system coordination. They just went upside down. They haven't been upside down in 20 years, so they gotta figure it out. So those are things that you can add in. So, and then I'll just leave this up because I do want to go through the movement just so you guys see kind of it in real life. I'm just going to do it with a squat. But I wanted to kind of leave these up because these are kind of the people that I've learned the most from. This, I just actually saw this only about a month ago, and this was the force plate guy that did all that ACL data that I just was talking about. It's phenomenal. He's out of the University of Calgary. Born to Walk, super accessible book. Might bore you, but super accessible, you'll understand it. Anatomy trains, a little less accessible. You might want to have some anatomy for that one. Functional Atlas of the Human Fascial System. I can bring that in and leave that in the gym because it's fun to page through, because this basically is a whole different, if you think about the anatomy atlas that we normally have seen like a Netter's, this is a functional atlas of the human fascial system. So Carla Stecco actually makes an anatomy book, instead of cutting out the muscles, is cutting out the actual fascial lines, which is pretty cool. The myofascial system in form and movement, Lori Nemes, is actually a friend of mine, and this book is awesome for, very accessible, but also has a ton of ideas as far as how to move a little bit better. And then What the Fuzz is actually a video that you can watch parts of it on YouTube, and you'll at least a mad scientist and fun to watch. And that talks about the fascia within the fascia, so there's that too. So those, I'll leave those up. But I want to just kind of go over the kind of what we talked about as far as what to train. Okay, so who wants to be my squat volunteer? Not everybody at once. Yes, Wendy. She's always a joiner.
I have a coverall on.
That's okay. Just tie them. Because they don't need to like see you.
You have like an Oxford.
No, they don't need to like see you. Come on, Wendy. It's a family program. Okay, let's close this. Everybody good with this for a second? I'm just gonna do that so we can see Wendy and she doesn't have to stare into it. Okay, so we want to do kind of the squat, and Wendy, you can even rewind, it's fine. So Wendy's injured. She's coming back from an injury. She's not injured anymore. It's okay. You're with me. Okay, so we're friends. All right. So the first thing that I want to establish is tensegrity. Right, so if I come up to Wendy and I kind of push on her like this, and you can kind of see there's a little buckling of the knees here. I'm not going to push you so super hard because I know she has a little bit of scary stuff. But you can see there's a little buckling here. This buckling is this is like basic like biotensegrity. If you've been in my class, you might see me do this. So the first thing is like she's buckling a little bit at the knees, so we know her hips aren't stacked quite perfectly. So we're going to see if we can bring her hips back over her heels. She's going to feel like she's going to fall into me, and that's fine. Then we're going to think about rib cage. She's so freaking strong. You're actually like, it's crazy. All right. Hi, can I touch you? So from there, her hips are there. We're going to see if we can get her hips to traction up. And then hook over. So we all talk about posterior and anterior pelvic tilt. You have a posterior and anterior rib tilt as well. So these can tilt too. So if she were to be posterior tilted, which is most people, she'd flare her ribs out. Can you flare the knee? Yeah. And this is how most of us are. Right? Anterior, flared ribs. So every once in a while, there's someone here, but I won't point them out. They have the other one, which is really fun. It's like this. Okay. So there's actually 4 technically, but really people have 2. So we go hips back to fix the anterior tilt. That's gonna naturally drop her tailbone towards the floor, like there's an anchor on her tailbone. And it was small, you probably didn't see it. And then we're gonna lift, and we're gonna hook the ribs and get them out of that anterior tilt. Can you hold that up there? So right there. So no buckle at the knee, right? So we have biotensegrity established in standing. Great, let's make it happen in a squat. So now, so we're gonna have her go ahead and go into a squat. Right? No, let's go like 90 degree, yeah. Okay, so now same thing. We can kind of just give her like a little excellent squat, right? She's almost better here than she was in standing. So the first thing that I would establish with her, so if she's working with me, I check, make sure pelvis is level, right? Chains are lined up. She looks super good. When you say a major athlete, so if I just push, now we've got our isometric. So now I'm saying, okay, I'm loading that line. Okay, I've got a line of tension. Does it feel like it's even left to right? Do you feel no? What you got? Yeah. Okay. So now all we're doing is saying like, oh, what's not working? She's doing a little inventory. So if you have a great body aware person, you can just have them do it yourself. If they're not great body aware people, then I would make her take off her coveralls and be in her boxers so that we could all see where she was. But how do you do it? Okay. So that's the isometric and coordination. Eccentric control. Are you fine jumping off or something? Okay. This is how I would start someone. So all you're going to do is come off, and then you're going to land and try and hold evenly like you just felt in your isometric. Okay. Yep. Yeah, in those shoes. Okay. Off of a Bosu. Great. Okay. Do you see the knee? Do it again. Yeah, you saw it. So we know the knees are probably the weakest link because we did the little boop, boop, right? And so
Can she jump in the other direction?
Sure, yeah, totally. Here. Wendy's here to please. Okay, do it again. Watch the knees. Yeah, I'm sure you saw it. You're right.
Go towards us this time.
It was better than the first time.
It was. It's always going to get better.
Yeah.
It will always get
Yeah,
better. Every
because
rep
you
gets
know.
better. You got to give people like 3 reps because they don't even know what they're doing at first. Yeah. But still, micro adjustments, right? She's still trying to figure it out. So there's a little like eccentric control we have to work on. So then we can watch her and be like, okay, which one is it? Is it mostly the left, mostly the right? And then we can start to target that line. And then we can map that up, right? So we can map it up with some of our fascial maps and see, okay, where do we connect to? Because it's probably not her knee, right? Most likely it's the hip into the low back in that cross coordination, okay? My guess is anterior sling coordination, just a wild guess. So now what we want to do is elastic strength and rapid force production. So now I want you to do the same thing, but when you land, you got to jump back up.
Okay. Land and jump.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll do it 3 ways.
Okay.
Okay.
Could you be faster?
Yes.
Ooh, but still hit the same depth.
So the same way.
Good. Do it again. Watch left to right, knees.
I can feel it.
It's so annoying because she's a body mover. Like she's a mover, so she's like, I'll just correct this. Watch this. But you can see, right? One's lagging behind the other, and so you can start to see that, like, oh, that one doesn't have that same rapid force production. So this is like an easy test you could do on yourself too, right? Do it with your friends. It's fun if you're clean. So thanks. Okay. Thank you. So that's kind of the easiest way. I just wanted to show you how it works into movement. And then I would say though that if you're kind of where we are, because there haven't been protocols there's a little bit of protocols for eccentric strength in rehab. A little bit. There are no protocols for the deceleration and for the rapid force production. There's protocols for how much weight you have to do with a seated calf lift before you can run again, but not of these two things. It hasn't been developed yet because the fascia world only really started to understand what it was looking at in the 90s. So we don't really have a ton to work on as far as what we're trying to do. So it's important that we have to kind of take care of ourselves. So I'd say cross the body line. Use the anterior and the posterior sling as your guidelines. That's what a bird dog is, right? A bird dog is anterior and posterior slings. Like posterior sling, but you're still holding with the anterior sling to stabilize. It's both. It's an isometric of both slings. And that's why I use it a lot in my training. It's why I use split stance a lot in my training. I do a lot of cross body work in my training. And so that's stuff that you should start to integrate into is how can I get across and how can I create production? The most simple thing that you can do, weight is in my right hand. I'm gonna load my left leg, sling, right? I'm gonna stabilize on my left leg and I'm gonna see, one, can I get this foot off the floor without having the buckle somewhere? Maybe I buckle my knee, right? We see this guy every time. Everybody seen that guy at the gym? So keep this straight, keep this level, keep this stacked. Okay, I can do that. Now, how far can I get this arm straight? Right? I'll do this and it's like people are fine. And then this little bit, break of the chain, right? So it's those little things. Take a 5-pound weight and just be bored and be like, how far can I get before this flares? You know what I mean? So those are just easy things to start incorporating, start to think about how to vary your workouts. But underlying all that is, the stronger you are, the more resilient you are across the board. So if you're not lifting something heavier than you lifted last week, you're not strength training. Okay? Progressive overload is the foundation of strength training. You have to continue to do more than you did before. It can be that I went 1 inch deeper. It can be I put on a 1/4 pound more on my squat. Sarah's totally done that. It's awesome. I took that from you. I was like, I'm doing that all day. PR. Okay, so yeah, it doesn't have to be 10 extra pounds. It can be an extra 1/4 pound. It could be an extra rep. It could be more time. Instead of 20 seconds, it was 25 seconds, or it was 22 seconds. It doesn't matter. But progressive overload is the foundation of strength. If you're not doing it, you're not getting stronger. Okay? So that's something just to look for as you're generally doing your thing. All right. At this time, if you have to go, look at that, 58 minutes. If you have to go, you may go. If you have questions, stay, and we'll start doing Q&A. Okay? Thank you all. And you can eat your tangerine, or you can have it here. And there's more tangerines if you need more. All right. Thank you.